Chapter 9. Thursday late afternoon. Doreen crossed the bridge and walked happily, enjoying the late afternoon sun. She hadn't been very long at Nan's, although the hours had disappeared quickly. Still, she had time to check out Penny's home and to figure out where the missing young man had possibly gone to from there. It wasn't long before she came to the row of houses described by Nan. Doreen wanted to check out the park behind them. She took the access path to the large open green space. Goliath alternated from being distracted to running ahead. Muggs, well, he just moseyed along sniffing with his big nose, and Thaddeus hummed at her shoulder. She noted a couple goalposts, as if for casual games of football. A pitcher's mound sat on the other side of the park. The nearby houses were all fenced with gates to the park, all chain-link construction per the park's guidelines for a consistent and symmetrical look. So, if Johnny had wanted to, he could certainly have opened the gate and stepped into the park, where anything could have happened. Thaddeus flew to the ground and walked along the fence. She wandered up and down it with him, considering what the growth of the trees and the shrubs would have been like some 29 years ago. Many of the bordering properties had cedar hedges, some were very thick. Back then, they would have been smaller, and anybody on the other side of the fence would be visible. Somebody might have called out to Johnny. He would have willingly gone to them. It wasn't likely that somebody would have gone into the backyard, knocked him over the head, tossed him over their shoulder, and carried maybe a 180-pound male through the park without being seen. It was late afternoon on a sunny day, at the time of his disappearance. Surely someone would have seen such an altercation. His friends could also have asked him to pick up booze, or to go to a party. The fact was, she didn't know what happened to him, or for that matter, to his car from the time Johnny went missing 29 years ago, to his friends dying in it just a few weeks after Johnny's disappearance. Anything was supposition at this point. And she knew what Mac thought of those. As she stood, she heard her name called. She turned to see Penny, peering over the gate. "It is you," Penny stated happily. Doreen walked toward her. "I wanted to see what the area was like," she confessed. Penny opened the gate. "I'm so glad you're taking this seriously. I know George is smiling in heaven right now." Doreen hoped so. It was kind of creepy though to think of all those faces up there, smiling down at the other poor sods who lived their life on Earth. She walked around the backyard, studying where the kitchen window was and what the view would be like. "Well, I doubt someone would have come onto your property and knocked him out, picked him up and carried him away," she said, "particularly with you watching." "Although we weren't necessarily watching the whole time," Penny admitted. "We often wondered what we missed. Makes more sense to call him into the park, although any number of people could have seen him there too." "Sure, but no one reported having seen him at that time on that day." "What happened to his vehicle? I understand he had a car?" "Yes. He had George's old car. The two worked on it constantly." With Penny's assistance, they went through the motions of where the bench had been, and where the knife was found. With her cell phone, Doreen took several photographs, including one of the gated entrance into the park. She also noted that if Johnny had wanted to, he could have gone around either side of the house into the front yard. "Do you know how his friends got the keys?" She shook her head. "I assumed they stole them. Johnny may very well have had the keys on him, or he may have just left the vehicle unlocked. For all I know, they were out for a joyride, they killed him and then took off in his car. I don't know. I understood that, for a while, they were all laughing at being able to hotwire cars. They might very well have thought to pull that prank with his vehicle. But Johnny and George had done a lot to soup it up. Johnny was pretty happy with the aftermarket stuff they were doing to it. He really wanted to get himself a muscle car. But George cautioned Johnny about getting rid of this car too early. Though Johnny wanted to sell it, George didn't want him to. It's quite possible that one of his friends decided he should sell it regardless, and if he didn't sell it, he should just give it to them, whether he liked it or not. So when he went missing, they might have taken it as their due. That's a possibility, Penny said. I know we tossed around an awful lot of theories back then. I don't know if that one in particular was ever brought up, but in a way, it does make sense. I know he wouldn't have sold it cheap though. The aftermarket upgrades cost thousands even back then. They talked a bit longer. When she felt she could learn nothing else, she started to leave but turned back. Do you remember anything about the vehicle? License plate model? Penny shook her head. No, but I'm sure Matt can get it from the files. Doreen nodded. I'm sure he can. It doesn't mean he will share it with me though. She gave a slight wave and with the animals, headed back the way she'd come. Penny called behind her. If you go along the creek, you'll come up on the north side of your place. Doreen looked at her in surprise, then tried to reorient herself from where she was. Thanks. I'll try that. She headed off to the right. The sun was setting and getting to that half-dusky light outside. That was a bit of a concern. It was also getting cooler. It was spring, but a breeze had picked up. Trusting in Penny, Doreen kept marching forward until she came to the creek. She stopped, studying it, then realized Penny was right. Doreen was farther up from where her property was. Now, if she could find a way to get to her familiar path on the creek, she could walk across the little bridge to her home. Muggs barked and kept up a snuffling sound as he went through the bushes toward the path. Thaddeus took several steps closer to her, and she wasn't sure if that meant he was nervous or if he thought they were going into the water. Goliath appeared to have absolutely no issues either way as he raced ahead of Muggs, who wanted to run after the cat. Pulled along by the basset hound, Doreen ran onto the path and took a right. Well, this is definitely a different way to go home. She looked back but saw no sign of Thaddeus, so she tugged on Muggs's leash to slow him down while calling for the bird. Thaddeus came around the corner, then flew up, missing her shoulder and smacking into her head. She cried out and caught him before he fell. Okay, you're staying with me, big guy. So no more freakouts. Okay. Okay, Thaddeus shrieked, then snuggled in against her chest. She continued homeward, marveling at the shadows lengthening around her. The moon was rising, but still enough sunlight remained to see. She wasn't scared in the dark, but it was hard to see the path. Definitely rockier than she was used to on her side, as if not many people ever walked here, which also made sense because she'd not seen many people come down the creek past her place either. Finally, she came to her little bridge, maybe 20 feet long, and her house was easily visible on the other side. She had left lights on inside, and something about it was almost fairy tale-ish. No, maybe more gingerbread house, why, she said, chuckling. And then she froze, sure she saw a shadow cross the window. Inside. Her heart raced, as she had forgotten to set the alarms before she'd come out with the animals. With her companions in tow, she ran across the bridge, sneaked up the side of her fence around to the front, and froze again. Mac's car was in her driveway. She groaned, picked up the phone and called him. His voice was irate when he answered. Where are you? He snapped. Maybe the question should be, where are you? She said dryly as she opened the front door. She could see him in the kitchen. Muggs barked, racing ahead to greet him. He spun and put away his phone, bending to pet Muggs. I was trying to get you on the phone for the last hour, and you wouldn't answer. I came over here to make sure you were okay and found the place empty and the alarms not set, he said accusingly. You didn't even lock the front or the back doors. She transferred Thaddeus to the kitchen table. He squawked in protest, then tilted his head and said, Mac is here. Mac is here. Yes, he is, she said. She checked her phone, and sure enough, the ringer was turned off. She groaned. I came down the creek and saw a shadow inside. I thought you were somebody after my antiques. She waggled her phone. And the sound was off. I could have been an intruder, he said in a stern tone. What's the point of setting up a security system if you don't use it? She raised both hands in frustration. Okay. It was a foolish thing to do. Nan sounded pretty lonely, so I grabbed the animals and went to visit her. He frowned. So then why did you come from the far end of the creek? She wrinkled her nose at him. You saw me, did you? No, he said, but then he shrugged. Well, I might have caught you coming around the corner. She glared at him. You saw me coming into the backyard anyway, and you still had to ask where I was, huh? He gave her a sheepish grin. I wondered if you'd tell me the truth. She rolled her eyes at him. Of course I told you the truth. What's the point in lying? I'll give you that. He chuckled. In your case, you're not a great liar anyway. No, I'm not. But I'm not a terrible one either, she snapped. She walked in and checked the clock. I didn't realize it was so late. I was hoping for a cup of tea before bed, but the caffeine might keep me up. So have something herbal, he suggested. Particularly if you have something to help you fall asleep. Such as? She walked to the drawer of teas. Look at them all here. I have no clue what any of them do. If it says sleepy time, he said dryly, I'm pretty sure it's not meant to give you energy during the day. Ha ha. She picked up several more. Chamomile, yarrow root, and dandelion. Are we seriously thinking dandelion leaves are crushed up in these packets? She opened one of the little yellow boxes that had a picture of dandelions all over it, pulling out the little tea bags. Yes, he said. I wouldn't be at all surprised. She shook her head. The only one I would count on as safe to drink in the evening is sleepy time. Which wouldn't be a bad idea, he suggested. You will be sleeping on the floor tonight, and that'll feel very different. You might need something extra to help you. That's a good idea, she admitted. She walked to the sink, filled the tea kettle, and turned it on. Then she leaned against the counter. Do you want a cup? No, he said. Now that I know you're safe, I'll go home. He walked toward the front door. Wait. She stopped him. What were you calling me about earlier? He hesitated a moment. It's really nothing. He continued to walk toward the front door. Well, if it was enough to call me, she said, trailing behind him, it's enough to tell me now. It's the cold case you're working on, he said. 2 friends of his were killed in a car accident driving his car. Yes, she said. I know that. What we don't know is how they got his car. He looked at her. According to one of the kids' fathers, his son bought it off of Johnny. Did that make sense at the time? She asked. Did he have money to do something like that 29 years ago? The dad said he paid a couple $100. He'd been saving up for it. She shook her head. Well, he might have been saving up for it, but no way Johnny would have accepted that money. At the doorway, Mac turned to her. How do you know that? Because Penny was just saying how George and Johnny spent hours working on that thing. Sure, Johnny wanted another rig. He wanted a muscle car, whatever the hell that is, she said with a wave of her hand. But the thing is, the 2 brothers souped up that car and it was worth a lot more. This was 29 years ago, Mac reminded her. A couple $100 bought a lot more back then. But they had put serious money into it, she argued. According to Penny, they did an awful lot of aftermarket upgrades. I mean, like a hot rod for the kid. Mac crossed his arms over his chest and leaned against the door. And that can cost a bundle, he admitted. How badly did Johnny want another vehicle? Pretty badly. But what he wanted was out of his price range, she said, and I doubt that a couple $100 for his car would have done the job. Plus, it didn't begin to pay George back for the money he put into the car either. Plus, he didn't want Johnny to sell the car. Feel free to contact Penny and ask her yourself. No, he said. But if you want to ask her what the vehicle might have been worth back then, it wouldn't hurt to find out. Although I doubt its value had a financial aspect for the two men who worked on it so much. Good point. She looked up at the clock. I'll think about asking her, but I'm too tired to do that now though. She did say thousands of dollars in those upgrades, so a couple $100 doesn't make sense. I'll feed the animals, then maybe have a hot bath before I settle in for an early night. He nodded. Exactly. Get to bed and get some rest. Right. Tomorrow is a whole new day, she said with yet another heavy groan. What's wrong with tomorrow? He asked. Tomorrow is Friday, she said. I'm still waiting for that phone call from Christie's, but I will head to your mother's and spend a few hours weeding as planned. Right, a phone call about the antiques. I keep forgetting. He looked around the living room, shook his head, and said, I can't imagine what this place will look like when those huge pieces are gone. I know, she said. But I'm still looking for paperwork that Nan says she had. Apparently what I found wasn't it. I'm not sure what you're looking for, he said, but it's hard to find anything in here. I know, she said with a sigh. And one of these days I'll venture into the garage. I did open the inside door to the laundry room finally, but then I had a hell of a time closing it. The garage is stuffed. She just shook her head. I don't know what Nan was thinking. I would guess that, like a lot of older people, he said quietly, she found it hard to let go of things. Doreen smiled. That could very well be. It was really nice to see her today. I would hate to lose her anytime soon. I'd hate that too, Max said. He opened the door and stepped out on the front step. And what are you doing as soon as I leave? She frowned at him. Taking a cup of tea upstairs. He banged his head lightly on the doorframe. No. You'll lock this door and set the alarms. Well, I meant that too. She shooed him away. Go, 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 go. The sooner you leave, the sooner I can go to bed. He snorted. Now, if you had somebody you were going with, that would make sense. Otherwise, I don't know. With that cryptic remark, he turned and walked to his car. She closed the door lightly behind him, reset the alarm, and checked the back door. She fed the animals while snacking on cheese and crackers. With the animals in tow, she picked up her tea, shut off all the lights, and walked up the stairs. She could only hope everything went well with this antique stuff. She wanted it all gone, safe and sound, as soon as possible. She walked into her bedroom and turned on the light. Everything looked the same, except for her bed on the floor. That was just a shame. She set down her tea and walked into the bathroom. It still amazed her that such a lovely bathroom was the only thing Nan had renovated in the house. She'd yet to mention it. Every time Doreen was with Nan, Doreen also forgot to bring it up. She needed a list for all the things she wanted to ask her grandmother. Deciding a hot shower would be better than a bath, she got in under the spray. While stepping out, drying herself, she heard a commotion in the bedroom. She grabbed her robe, threw it on, and stepped out of the bathroom. And glared. What are you doing, Muggs? Muggs was at the closet doors, barking like a crazy man. She frowned and thought about it. Mac had been here, but who was to say somebody hadn't come inside ahead of Mac? Both doors to the closet were closed, but she tested them just the same, then tied the doorknobs together with a pair of nylon stockings, and stepped back into her bathroom. She pulled out her phone and called Mac. As soon as he answered, she said, "Was anybody in the house when you arrived?" "Of course not," he said. "You were out." "Would you mind coming back then?" she asked in the hushed whisper. "And fast."